start recording our session, and let me share the screen. Can you guys see the screen? Okay, nice. So I will be mostly talking, and every 5 minutes or so I will be checking. I will be checking the chat. So let's just see if there are any questions. So this is button versus big blind. And as you can see on Jack 8-4, we are using a very polarized strategy mostly. We are not using most of our block betting. We don't use a block bet very often. The reason for it is we don't have a lot of eights, and we don't have much of an advantage on this board, right? We don't have like 7-6, 7-5, 6-5 offsuit. We don't have any offsuit eights pretty much. So we'd rather be playing a polarized range. It's not like ace queen 5 where we could just bet 100% of the time. So we're mostly using a bigger size pot bet or like half pot. If I were you, I would just be using 3/4 and check. I would not be splitting my range because it's very hard to split and it doesn't give you much EV. So it's pretty easy. We value bet all of our strong hands, 10s, 9s, and 8s are indifferent. I would be checking back 10-9s. I would be always betting ace-8 because we want to have as less aces in our checking back range as possible. Because, you know, aces do not really help us. When we check back and the turn is an ace, like people are going, like, checking 100% of the time because they expect this card to hit us so much. So whenever, even if I have ace-4, I would prefer to bet like half pot or 3/4 rather than checking it back, because again, it's just like there is no need for me. I don't want to have this hand in my checking back range, and it strengthens our range. It could be our c-bet check call probe river line. We could call it check raise if we have a backdoor flash draw. So it's a nice hand to have. This is an important thing. We talked about it before, but ace-10 through ace-5 we are betting almost all the time. However, if we have a backdoor flash draw, we are, you know, like a lot less likely to bet, right? If we have ace-7, ace-6, ace-5 with a backdoor flash draw, we would rather check it back because we have, you know, we want to strengthen our weak checking back range. And ace-5, if we see bet and we face a check raise, we cannot call. So we would rather bet ace-5, you know, and bet folded, and ace-5 check, because on any diamond we can continue calling a probe. So our range is a lot stronger. So we basically are betting our complete shit, like ace-2 of clubs, right? You should never be checking this hand because you cannot basically improve. Even if the turn is a 3 or a 5 where you hit a gutter and you face a big bet, you probably cannot call. You probably have to fold, or it's like a very close call for you. So this hand has very, very poor playability as a check. So I would rather turn it into a bluff right away. If you have ace-2 of diamonds, again, it's close, but as you can see here, we're checking it 50% of the time. But we're never checking back ace-2 of clubs because, like, the potential of this hand as a check is very, very poor. Same with our kings. And as we discussed before, 10-7, 9-7, 7-6, 7-5, 6-5. These are the hands which we want to be checking back quite a bit because they improve our range on low cards like 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. And like if the turn is a 3 and we face a bet and we call and the river is a queen, right? And our opponent checks. So our opponent could be check folding any 8 if we don't have these hands in our checking back range. Because once we call a big bet on the turn, we have our only showdown value. We have our rather a pair or like a strong ace high, something like that. So we have very, very few bluffs. So he can exploit us by check folding a lot of his medium strength hands like third pairs and fourth pairs, because he knows that we don't have enough bluffs. But by having these hands in our checking back range, we could call a turn probe and have a very profitable bluff on the river when he checks, because when he checks, he's usually going to be check folding. So pretty clear cut strategy. So let's see how we should be playing versus a 3/4 bet. So this is a 3/4 where really nitty. Like 7-6, 7-5, 6-5. Obviously, we're just check folding, even 9-7 and 10-7, because we're facing a 3/4 bet and we're facing it against a button who has an extremely strong range. So any gut shot is a fold. Even some fours could be a fold. King Queen, however, is a call. King Queen is a lot stronger than 7-6 because, first of all, we don't really need to bluff the river, depending on what river, but we have some showdown value, and also we have more equity versus a jack. So versus a jack, we have 6 outs right away. Any king, any queen helps us. And on a 10, on an ace, on a 9, we're gonna hit a gutter or an open ender. So this hand is really strong. It's a lot stronger than 7-6. Versus jack, we have basically only 4 outs, while and not really backdoors, while king queen has a lot more equity, and it's equity very pure, so to speak. So king queen is a lot better hand to call rather than 7-6, for example. Okay, so what surprises some people here, and what might surprise, is that we're check raising quite a bit. We're check raising right 12% of the time, and when you face a big bet, you don't want to really be check raising a hand like jack 10 or jack 9, right? Like, because you can't really expect to get it in good. If you are raising and say you raise 9 and you face a jam, you obviously have to call, but you have like 38% equity, and it's pretty optimistic. You're probably gonna even have less than that, but yeah, you're gonna have around 36% equity, something in that regard. So why check raise it? Why not call it and let him bluff a7, a6, a5? Let him barrel all this, all these shitty hands which won't be able to call, like king 10, king 9, ace 10, ace 9. We should let him barrel over this hand, and there are very few hands which we could get value from. Yeah, he could call us with queen 9, queen 10, something like that, but I mean, not a lot of hands. So what do you think would happen if big blind was playing a strat? Also keep in mind that we're never check raising 2-pair. We're only check raising top pairs, because there is no point in check raising 2-pair. We're not missing any value by calling. If we call, the board is already going to be 10 big blinds, and the stacks are going to be like 20. So even if the turn goes check, we could we could just overbet jam the river if we really want to. So there's no need for us to make the pot bigger, as it is, and we don't need any protection. So if the opponent has like ace or a king and he hits a king or an ace, it's bingo for us. We're just gonna take all of his money. However, jack 9 needs a lot of protection, because our opponent could have a queen, could have a king, could have an ace in his range, so our hand is a lot weaker. So we would rather check raise jack 9, even though it's a weaker hand, than we would check raise 2-pair, because 2-pair don't need to make the pot bigger, and there is no need to we require a lot more protection. If we were playing cash and we were playing like 100 big blinds deep, the opposite would be true. We would never be check raising any top pairs, obviously. We would always be calling jack 10, jack 9, queen jack if we were playing even 50 big blinds deep. But we would not always, but very often be check raising our 2 pairs, because now we're very incentivized to make the pot bigger, because our hand is worth like 20, 30, 40 big blinds. So, by making the pot bigger, we will make more money, which is not the case here. Okay, and we're check raising some weird hands like queen 4 and some 8s sometimes, which into a bluff. So what's going to happen if big blind was playing a strategy where big blind's like never check raising? When he faces a big bet, when he sees like a pot bet or 3/4, he's never check raising the flop. He's always going to be like, okay, so he either has a very strong hand or he has a piece of shit. So I'm just going to be calling like, most of my range, right? So how are we going to exploit that? Buttons and bets. So 3/4. again, so big blind is not check raising versus a 3/4 bet. Obviously, if you bet block bet, he's going to check raise. So like you want to be c-betting 3/4 with pocket sevens? Well, we can't really add more bluffs because he's not folding more, right? He's just never check raising us. So, but he still has all of his good jacks in his check calling range, and he still has, he's calling us with hands like king queen offsuit. He's calling us with hands like 7-6 with a backdoor flash draw. So like his range is very strong. He's defending quite a bit, and yeah, he's now check raising. But basically, Rava get the answer that we can bet more value. That's exactly right. The hands which we were scared to bet before, because we were scared of getting a check raise. So basically, our medium value hands like pocket nines, hands like king 8, queen 8. These are the hands which benefit the most from him not being able to check raise, because now we can get more value from him, and we're not gonna face a donk on the turn. So like if we check back our queen 8, on a lot of the turns we're gonna be in a pretty tough spot, because he's going to be pro-betting, over-betting, putting a lot of pressure, because once we check back he knows that it's very unlikely that we have a jack, right? So our range is very, very, very capped. So he's going to be probing quite a bit. And to not put ourselves into the spot, we could bet 3/4 with queen 8, for example. Let me open the situation. So, no check raise, yeah. So basically, versus a block bet, our opponent could check raise, but versus a 3/4 bet, he cannot check raise. But as you can see, he's calling quite a very wide range. He's calling a lot wider than he's calling here. Here he's folding 54%, here he's folding only 50% of the time, because his range is stronger, right? So he can call more shitty hands. And here we can see that, yeah, we're betting absurdly a lot. So basically, every 8 now is a bet. 6s, 5s, ace 4, king 4, queen 4, we could bet as a pot. And I mean, we could bluff a lot more now because we're value betting very, very thin. So obviously the counter to this strategy is going to be check raising even a hand as weak as jack 6 on the flop when we see a big bet. But since our opponent is not doing it, since our opponent is playing very, very nitty, like our optimal strategy now becomes just to be value betting very, very thin. The hands which were still checking back are some weak 4s, some pocket pairs like pocket 7s, pocket 6s, 9, 8, and stuff like that. So the lesson which we could learn from this is that if you can freeze an action with a big bet, you can do it with a middle hand. You don't need to have a strong hand in order to bet big, given that you're freezing the action, so that your opponent thinks that your range is very, very polarized, and there is no sense check raising you, because you either have a very, very good hand or you have a bluff. So like there is no point check raising jack 10 versus a polarized range. So you exploit that by adding more middle-ish hands in your big bet size, because you get quite a lot of EV from him never check raising, because for only 3 big blinds, you get to the river, right? You get to the river for 3 big blinds, and you're going to be playing river in position. This also works with raising. So if we're playing small blind versus big blind 3 max, and small blind raises, and we call, and the board is something like 10-6-3, or like, let's go queen 6-3. Small blind c-bets like quarter pot, and you have a 6. This could be a very profitable raise for you, even though it looks like a very standard call. But raising could be better if your opponent thinks that you're only raising your really, really good hands, like 2 pairs and good queens, and your really, really shitty hands like 8-7 offsuit or like some backdoors. So if he faces a raise, like he should be free betting his queens. He should be free betting even his hands like pocket nines, pocket eights, pocket sevens, stuff like that, in order to fight back. If he's never doing that, if he's always calling or folding, basically, he's never like free betting, then you could raise any six, even a hand like 6-5. You could always make a small raise in position, like to make him fold to overs and to pot control, and you're still getting value from his ace highs, from his backdoors and stuff like that. So for adding extra three big blinds, you accomplish the same goal you're accomplishing here. You're getting your hand to the river, and you're going to be playing in position. This is like very good for you. Okay, so something to remember by. And the second exploit, what do you think would happen if we're playing against an opponent whose strategy looks like this? So he's betting as a block bet 100% of the time. And I think we will encounter the strategy in real life very often, so we need to know how to counter it. So what's going to happen, like this is versus a block bet, we're check raising around 20% of the time, and we're raising very wide range because we know that when he bets big, his range is sort of capped. So what would happen if our opponent was just betting 100% of the time? What do you think? Okay, so somebody thinks we should check raise less. Somebody thinks that we should raise more. Somebody thinks raise more bluffs. I mean, raising more bluffs is not a good strategy if you're not balancing it correctly. Okay, so basically, as a rule of thumb, if you don't know what to do, if your opponent is betting wider than he should, your counter strategy is that you start check raising wider. So this works very well in limp pots when you're playing heads up, like 10-5-3 or like Queen Jack 5 is the board which small blind should be playing from a very small c bet. He should be c betting around 50-45% of the time, something like that. I mean, depending on the stack depth, but like 20 big blinds, it should be around 45% c bet. So if he's playing like c bet 70% of the time, right? So your counter strategy to that, and he's c betting all sorts of hands. He's c betting his queens, his jacks. Let's even go like Queen 6-5, because on Queen Jack 5, people usually don't c bet where weak jacks. It's very easy to back for them. But on Queen 6-5, some people will be c betting like any 6 and any 5 because they think this is a weak hand and it needs a lot of protection, right? So versus that strategy, you start check raising extremely wide on the flop. You start check raising even in a hand as weak as Queen 3, for example. Queen 6-5, you have Queen 3 offsuit, and you could start check raising because now there are a lot more hands for you to get value from. Because before he was checking back his 5, he was checking back most of his 6s. So there is no point for you to check raise Queen 3 because you're not getting value from many hands which are worse. Because if he has a lot of hands which are worse, he's just checking them back. So, but now he bets all of these hands, and if he has a pair and he faces a check raise, it's unlikely he's going to fold it to just one raise. So he's going to call all of them. So like there's a lot more incentive for you to be check raising pretty much every top pair. Here, however, things work a little bit differently. So and button big blind things sometimes work a little bit differently. So for example, on ace high boards, as you know, if you're facing only 100% block bet on a board like ace 10-5 or ace queen 6, something like that. If your opponent is betting a quarter pot 100% of the time, it means that you should start check raising less, right? Because his range becomes stronger. Like he's hitting his range so far that he should be using two sizes. He should be using a block bet and he should be using like 3/4 bet. We talked about this before. So if he does not use his bigger size, it means that his small size becomes a lot stronger. Usually, when you're betting 100% of the time or close to it, your range becomes weaker. But on an ace-high boards, button versus big blinds, your range becomes stronger if you're only using a small block bet. So this is a very situation versus 100% block bet, you should be check raising less. This is very unusual, but this is one of the spots where it could be happening. So this situation, as you can see, if you compare this to this, so we should be check raising less. Here we're check raising 20% of the time. Here we're check raising only 14% of the time. And this is happening because before, when he had ace jack, king jack, queen jack, jack 10, he was betting a pot bet. He was betting very big. So now when he bets, block bet, his range is very capped. He doesn't have a good jack, right? He either has a hand like aces or two pairs or sets, or he has like a shitty hand, like a medium strength hand. However, now when he bets block bet, he has all of his good jacks. So there is no point for us to start check raising a hand like jack 5 or jack 6, as we were doing here, for example. So we're check raising only our good jacks, but the sizing has become bigger. Before we were check raising mostly 4.5 and little bit 6. I mean, basically 50-50. Now we're never check raising 4.5 and we're only check raising 6. In reality, if I were given a bigger check raising size, I would be using even that. So if we face, so the pot is 4.5 big blinds, we face 1 big blind and we're check raising like 7, right? We're making a huge raise because now like there are a lot more value, there are a lot more hands to get value from, as it was the situation. Like before, we were making a lot of small check raises because the point of our check raise was just like to make him fold a lot of hands as well, like to get for protection. But now he's betting all of his weak jacks, which he was checking back before. Now he's betting all of his pocket pairs, which could call a check raise as well. Now he's betting ace king, ace queen, from which we get value as well. So now there are a lot more middle-ish hands from which we want to get value. So we are not check raising more often, but we're check raising our good hands with a bigger size, because our opponent's overall betting range is weaker, so they have more value. It's kind of like on the river. If you have a weakish hand, you will bet like half pot. But if your hand becomes stronger, if it's really strong, you could bet pot bet. If it's extremely strong, you could overbet or like overbet jam all in, right? It's better dependent on how much equity it has. And here, our hands becomes a lot stronger, so we should make our check raise bigger. However, we cannot really check raise queen jack 3 or jack 5 because his range is still very strong. You know, like, yeah, now he has a lot more 7, 6, and 5s, but at the same time, he now has king jack, queen jack, jack 10. So these hands kind of compensate for each other. So we're still raising the same sort of hands, but we're raising for a lot bigger size. Okay, so as we can see, we are not exploiting only in direction of how often we check raise, because some people don't like changing their sizings. They only like, okay, so I will check raise more often or I will check raise less often. But you actually can choose not only frequency, but you can change only your sizings as well. So here we're check raising even at less frequency than we were doing before, but our sizing becomes bigger because there are more hands to get value from. Like now, he has to call us with ace king when we check raise 6 big blinds. He has to call us with ace queen, king queen sometimes. He has to call us with like 9-7 with a backdoor flash draw, with any 4, with any 8. Before, most of his hands most of these hands were checking back, right? And we could not really get value from those. So raising with a bigger sizing makes a lot more sense. Is this clear, guys, or you need further explanation? Okay, nice. Yeah. The hands which can't really call. The backdoor, like Queen 5 is a backdoor flash draw, King 5 is a backdoor flash draw, Ace 5 is a backdoor flash draw, King 3, this sort of hands, and a gutter. I actually would prefer to have a gut shot without a backdoor flash draw, because if I have a gutter with backdoor flash draw, like I could, there are a lot more turns I could be calling. But if I have a hand like 6-5 offsuit and I face a, a block bet, unless I improve my hand and then, unless I hit a 7, a 6, or a 5, I would be forced to be folding my hand on the turn. But 6-5 with a backdoor flash draw has a lot more good turns where I don't need to fold. Yeah, but like you're going to be bluffing a lot as well, right? So if people bet folding ace king, it's good for us. Yeah, we are missing value with Jack 10, Jack 9, but it's not like you would have made more money by calling with Jack 9, right? Because like you'd rather ace king just folds on the flop because you make him fold 6 outs. If you call with Jack 9 when he has ace king, he's just going to be checking back the turn, right? Because he has a lot more better bluffs than ace king. He's not going to bluff it. So his line is going to be bet the flop, check the turn, check the river, unless he improves. So there is no way for you to make more money from ace king with Jack 9. So if he folds, it's good for you. And also, like, it's not amazing. You would prefer him to call, but it's better than letting him see turn and river for free. Also, you are going to have a lot of bluffs, so it's good for you as well. Like your bluffs now make more money because you have more fold equity. That's how GTO works, basically. You have two different ranges which benefit from different things, and if your opponent is not doing one thing, like if he's too tight or too nitty, you're still with your entire range gonna make the same EV. Okay. So now let's go to the turn. So block bet call, and the turn is like a queen of diamonds. So this is the situation where people make a ton of mistake. Um, okay. So while it's calculating, like we need to wait for it to finish calculating anyway. What is your strategy on the turn? If you bet, let's say you bet 3/4, and the turn is a queen. So you bet 3/4 on the flop. Actually, we'll go. Well, that's not necessarily true, because you could just make your sizing bigger. You could bet at a smaller frequency, and you can make a bigger sizing. You don't have to be betting more often, because you are applying equal pressure by making your sizing bigger. Okay, so in terms of hands, uh, always see bet in a hand like Ace Jack, second barrel on the turn, or like King Jack, or Jack 10, Jack 9. Are we betting these hands? Are we betting all of our queens. Are we betting a7, a6, a5? Like, are we bluffing all of our bluffs? Let's start. I mean, block bet has already calculated, so let's see block bet, and then we will move to 3/4. Okay, so what sizing? 3/4. All right. I mean, I don't think you should be using two different sizings. It's very bad, right? Because you're not a GTO bot. You cannot balance them out. Or it's going to be very tough. I mean, most likely you're going to give some information for your opponent if you like bet 3/4, and then all of a sudden you bet half pot. I mean, if you're very, very confident, you can play like mind games with your opponent, right? And sometimes like bet half pot when you hold a straight, and he thinks that your range is weaker when in reality your range is stronger. But most people, like, most people are not that good. Most people are just going to be betting the size they want to bet with their hand, and they're just going to telegraph to your opponent what they have. Okay. Actually, let me add 3/4 because it's not here. But for now, we talked about betting bigger on Jack 8-4. We talked about the exploits of the people who are not using a bigger size, who are only using a block bet. And we talked about how we should be exploiting a person who's very passive, that we should be using a bigger sizing with a hand like pocket nines or king 8 on the flop, even though we would prefer to bet a block bet. But when we bet a block bet, we expect a lot of aggression from our opponent. However, if we bet 3/4, most people would be very, very nitty, thinking that our range is very polarized. Okay, so Rafa was right. I mean, not only Rafa, most of you, that were betting 3/4 only, and look how thin we keep going for value. We keep going for value ace jack, king jack, jack 10, jack 9, jack 7, jack 6, jack 5, like very, very thin. Even pocket 10s, pocket 9s, and ace 8 are going for value here as well, which is, very, very thin value bet on the turn, which is most people are not making. The reason why we could value bet so thin, the reason why we could keep betting nines, and keep in mind, we're betting 3/4 of the pot, we're not betting like half pot or anything like that, we're betting really, really big sizing, because if we start betting half pot, again, we're going to be very easy to read. It's going to be very clear what we have. So betting a bigger size is very, very thin. And these are our bluffs, ace-10, ace-9, ace-7, ace-6, ace-5, king 10, king 9. Again, the hands which we are checking back are going to be hands like 7-6, 7-6-5, 7-6, 6-5, 7-5. Because if we improve, like our checking back range, as you can see here, is extremely weak. And if we improve, like if we check and turn as a 5, we're going to be facing a lot of aggression on the river. Our opponent is going to be very, aggressive versus us. So checking back these hands protect us. I mean, most of the time we're going to be checking them back on the flop, so we won't even have them in this situation very often. But still, we should never be betting them. Same goes the hand like. Actually, 9-6 of diamonds is close. Like, we're still betting it sometimes. I would be checking it back 100% of the time as well. I would rather be betting a hand like king 5 of clubs, right? Or ace 5. Because, like, this hand cannot improve on the river. Even if we improve to an ace, it's not that, like, our hand is not that good. So I would rather be turning these hands into a bluff all of the time. So, when we're facing three-quarter spot, you can see again how loose big blind should be defending. We're defending 10-8, 9-8. We're defending ace-8, king-8. We're defending ace-7, ace-6, which is already quite loose. We're defending 6-4, 5-4, which is, very, very loose. Mostly no one will be defending that wide of a range. So, how we should be playing the spot in reality? How do you think? Versus an actual regular. Button. No, being button. Let's start with button and then big blind. Yeah, less win value and more bluff seems like a good strategy. Because, again, it's very hard for people to be calling you with 8-7, 8-6. It's very hard for people to be calling you with, 6-4, 5-4. It's very, very loose calls. And also, when facing a block bet, as you can see, big blind should be slow playing a lot of two pairs, Jack 8, Jack 4, 8, 4. And it's very hard for people to be slow playing these two pairs on the flop. Usually people want to get to check raise it right away on the flop. So you can expect big blind's range to be actually quite a bit weaker. I would not expect to see a lot of Jack 8 and 8-4 in big blind's range. I think most of these hands are check raising the flop. I mean, he will have Jack 6, Jack 5 more often, but it's not. Like, still, overall, his range is going to be weaker. Yeah, so I would be checking ace-8, I would be checking 10s and 9s. I would not be going for that thin of value. I'm still value betting a hand like Jack-10, Jack-9, or like King-Jack, I think. But I'm going to be checking these hands for sure. And I'm going to be bluffing all of my ace-7, ace-6, ace-5, ace-9, ace-10, ace-king. I'm never checking any of those. I think King 4 has too much showdown value. We have like 45% equity. Here we have like 20. So I think if we have a 4, we should be checking back. But yeah, any other bluffs, I think it's a good spot for us to start bluffing. Like, basically, any hand which has no showdown value, I would be bluffing unless I have a hand like 9-7 of diamonds or 7-6 of diamonds, something which has a lot of equity but cannot call it. Cannot check call. So when you're playing big blind versus button, and when you're button, and then when the turn is any overcut, you could just be extremely aggressive on it, like super aggressive, because people will be overfolding, most of them. It's very hard to be, even if they're just folding every 4 and 8-7, 8-6, which is expected. I mean, it's very hard for you to call three-quarters bet with 8-7 75% of the time. I mean, even King 8 is a tough call. It's not like you have a third pair with no improvement and you're facing a huge bet on the turn versus a button, which hits this queen a lot. So yeah. And how we should be playing this sport as a big blind. What do you guys think? Versus population, of course. We could just look how we should be playing versus GTO. Versus reg population. Let me, you know. Hmm. You okay? Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Nice. So, firstly, it's not clear how we should be playing versus the GTO the population tendency. And right now we're talking about all over cards, not necessarily a queen, right? Like on a king, on an ace, basically the same concept applies. But queen is obviously a very good bluffing card. For even for an not a very experienced player, it's going to be very clear that queen, is a very good bluffing card. And if he has here a hand like a7, a6, I would think he's going to be bluffing it because it's just so good. Like the card is so scary that I expect. Yeah. I expect them to be bluffing at a very decent frequency when there's overcut. Also, I don't think people will be value betting very thin using a big size when they have a hand like pocket tens or when they have pocket nines, yeah, or when they have jack seven. I think these hands are going to be checked back. Even a jack is not necessarily like if they have jack 10, I think they could bet half pot, right? But I think very few people would bet big here with Jack 10. I think they either going to be checking back or they want to bet like half pot, right? To get a little bit of value. But they're not going to be betting, like huge. Um, so if we look at this strategy, like this is how you are playing if he has all the good jacks in his betting range. Um, and this is three quarters. This is our strategy right now. So I think that let's change it a little bit. I don't think we will see tens, nines in a value betting range. Jack 7, Jack 6, Jack 5, I think is very unlikely. Um, I think Jack 9 is like 50-50 when we're talking about big bet. I don't know. It's like it seems close to me. Some people will go for. I mean, some people will go for thin value, but I doubt they will be using this big of a size. So if we keep it like that, and I think these hands. I mean, some people will be bluffing them, some people will be giving them up. So let's keep it like that. But yeah, their range is a lot more polarized when they're using a big sizing. So this is a big size. I actually think that it's a good spot to call. I will be calling here any eight usually, and I will be calling. I mean, I will not be calling like king four offsuit, but this is some people I will. Like it's close. If I see a guy checking back here a hand like ace jack or jack 10 on the turn, if I saw him doing like that, then I would for sure be calling with any pair on the turn because it means that his range is extremely polarized. He either has a queen or something better, or he has a bluff. And it's very easy to be over bluffing here. So as you can see here now, we're calling like 5-4, 6-4, queen 4, like any 4. Easy. If he's not value betting 10s, 9s, and if he's not value betting jack 10, jack 9, very often. So if he's checking this hand sometimes. And keep in mind that like he's not bluffing these hands all the time. He's still checking back 7-6, 7-5, 6-5. He's still checking back ace-10, ace-9, ace-7, ace-6. So I'm not sure like that 5-4 is a very good call, although you should make it as GTO sometimes. But like 8-7 is a very good call. I will not never be folding 8-7 versus anyone. And just to keep in mind that it's possible for you to find a call with a hand like queen 4 or ace 4. Sorry. Like it seems like a very loose call, but it's not really that loose, because for people it's very easy to be overbluff in this spot. So versus whom I will be overfolding. What do you think? Versus whom we should be overfolding? Again, obviously, this is guys who are not bluffing enough on the turn. It's very easy, but we can never know, is he bluffing enough on the turn or is he not? How can we know that? So the big tell, which you can see if a guy is checking back a hand like a7 offsuit on the flop. Or like showing down king 9, something like that. So if he's like, oh, I have ace high has showdown value, I'm going to block bet and check it down, or I'm going to just show it down from the flop. If he's using this logic, then it's very like he's just never gonna have enough bluffs. Like versus people like that, you could even consider folding a jack on the turn, because if he doesn't bluff his ace highs, then just he doesn't have enough bluffs. And there are quite a few people like that. I mean, I think on higher stakes there are not a lot of them, obviously, but on lower stakes you will see a lot of people who will be showing down ace highs and stuff. So this is the big tell, because I think almost everybody will be bluffing on a queen of diamonds. It's such a perfect card for you to bluff, because so many hands have hit, and like you're making him to fold so many stuff. So it's just like it seems natural that you should be bluffing this card. Okay, and if we bluff, like he calls, and say the river is a 10. So I will just go over this spot because I think it's sort of an interesting spot. So yeah, we are value betting here some two pairs, and we are bluffing pretty much everything we could bluff. So all of our ace highs, you know, all of this stuff. So the interesting thing is how wide we should be calling, and we should be calling quite a bit. Like we should be calling king queen, king jack, hands like that. And also keep in mind that on the turn we were slow playing some of our two pairs. So if we had a hand like jack 4 or queen 4 or jack 8, we don't always check raise it. Like 50% of the time we just slow play it. And a lot of the players would try to get it in on the turn with a straight or two pair. So the range actually is going to be a lot weaker here. So again, don't value bet two pair probably. In order for you to value bet two pair, your opponent has to call you with king 8 sometimes, or king queen, or king jack, hands like that. If he's not calling that, it's a very easy give up for you. On check back for you, and at the same time I think we should be hero calling this spot a lot, because people will be over bluffing it usually, because again, if you, for example, if your opponent is never value betting to pair on this river, let's say he's value betting only like queen jack plus, something like that. So we already could be calling, a hand like 8-6, for example, or a hand like 6-4. or for free, which is again for free of diamonds, which is again looks like a ridiculous call. But if your opponent has enough bluffs, like you just basically need him to have a7, a6, ace5. If he has those, it's enough for you. It's enough for you to make a call. And you know, lots of people will not be value betting that thing. Okay. Now let's talk about last turn, 7 of diamonds, and then let's go to the next spot. What do you have of 7 of diamonds? What do you think of 7 of diamonds? As I calculated. Which sizing we should be using as a button? Well, BB would have a donking range if we were facing a big bet on the flop, if we were facing like 3/4, because then our range would improve a lot more. 10-9 is a bigger part of our range, 8-7, Jack-7 is a bigger part of our range. But when we face a block bet, we have a lot of weak hands like ace-9 offsuit in our calling range, or like, you know, lots of backdoors. And we check raise most of our jacks on the flop, so our range is a lot weaker. So we can't afford to have a donking range on this turn. But yeah, like in other situations, we could. So what sizing? 3/4. Okay, half pot. Okay, let's see. So now we're pot betting as well as we're 3/4ing. Even though this hand has improved his range, but not as strongly as. So basically, the bottom of our value betting range is like pocket nines, and we have already 73% equity. So if we compare with the range here, here if we have like a hand like pocket nines, we have 72 and ace-8 has 67. Here ace-8 has 69 and we have 73.5. So we have a little bit more equity, and this 7 did not improve our opponent as much, especially our good hands like our aces. It's actually interesting that our aces have and our nines have pretty much the same equity. Nines have 73.5, aces have 74. I mean, obviously because nines have a gut shot, but versus a calling range, nines have 70% equity, aces have, yeah, 70% equity. So nines are as good as aces in this situation, which is very interesting. And I think it's happening because when we block bet the flop, big blind is going to be check raising almost all of his jacks, or like pretty much all of his offsuit jacks. So when he's going to be check raising almost all of his jacks, like nines and aces are no different, because the only difference between nines is that we are losing to jacks, while aces beat jacks. But nines have a lot more equity than aces versus two pairs, versus straights, versus, you know, hands like that, because they have a nut gutter. So, you know, nines we could just again bet big here, like 3/4 or even a pot bet. Interestingly enough, nines have, yeah, as much as equity as queen jack here. So we're still betting really big, and we're bluffing the same amount of hands, the same type of hands. Let's look at the calling range. And this is where it gets trickier. It's very much the opposite of what we saw. Because now this is 3/4. If you have 7/6, you have to be folding. And if you have ace-8, king-8, queen-8, you have to be folding as well. So on a queen, when the turn was a queen, people usually don't tend to call the third pairs, because their hand has gotten a lot weaker, and queen has improved my range a lot. But when the turn is an undercard, people will be playing differently. People will be calling 7/6, people will be calling 6/4, and people will be calling ace-8, king-8, queen-8. Because they have second pair with a good kicker. So in reality, people will be calling a lot more often here. So it means that here we should be bluffing, like when the turn is an undercard, usually we should be bluffing a lot less, unless we expect our opponent to fold an 8. Basically, for us to consider a bluff with a hand like a6 or a5, we need to be sure that our opponent could fold a queen-8. Because if he's never folding an 8 on the turn, there is no reason for us to be bluffing, because he will be calling a lot more often. Unless we could cap his range, unless like he calls the turn, but then he always folds the river, something like that. Like if he's never calling us, if he's overfolding to a third barrel, then we could consider. But basically, in order to bet the 7 of diamonds, we need to have a very, very good plan of how we're going to be playing rivers. And most of the time, in order to bet the turn, we need to be over bluffing rivers. We need to be bluffing them all the time. So when the turn is an overcard, when you're playing button versus big blind, it's usually a good spot for you to be over bluffing. And as a big blind, it's usually a good spot for you to be over calling. And the opposite is true. If the turn is an undercut, especially an undercut like this, usually you should not be bluffing as much, especially if you have a good draw, because people won't be folding here a lot, especially if you bet like a pot bet. So versus a pot bet, we should be folding here 7/6, 7/6/5, 6/4, king-8, ace-8, making queen-8 100% of the time, making like really, really neaty folds. And usually people don't do it. Usually people are never folding second pair to a second bet. So like this is the situation where we should be value betting a lot thinner, but we should probably not be bluffing unless, again, we have a good reason how we're going to be playing rivers. Okay. So let's go to another spot. So let's go ace jack 3, where we gonna be mostly betting small, but we still have a big bet with our ace king, ace queen kind of hands. So when we block bet and we face a raise, I mean, again, in reality, people are block betting 100% of the time, so I will not be check raising a hand like ace-9, ace-8, and I will never be check raising as a bluff. Again, because people's range is just way too strong, I might check raise only ace-10 plus in terms of strength of hands, but so if we face a check raise, and again, as you can see, our check raise here is very polarized, so we're mostly using 6 big blinds. We're mostly using a big sizing for a check raise because we want to play 2 streets. If our range was not polarized, like on the board 10 deuce deuce or like 7 6 6, where not only where check raising not only trips but our sevens as well. We would like to use a smaller size, like 4.5 or even 3 big blinds. So the more polarized our range is, the more sizing we're using. Like in cash, there are some spots where versus a block bet, where you bet like 1 big blind, you're going to be check raising to like 12 big blinds on the flop. So this is like 1 big blind, you go like 2x over bet on the flop, something like that, because the range is extremely polarized and the stacks are very, very deep. So you want to make the pot bigger right away. Okay, so we're facing a check raise, and here the interesting thing is if we have a pot pair like kings or queens without a backdoor flush draw, we're folding it, which is especially if we have a queen of diamonds, which is a lot of the players won't be doing. And obviously, if we have a pocket pair with no backdoor flush draw, we're going to be folding it as well. I will be folding, yeah, like I will be always folding queens if I don't have a backdoor flush draw here, because you're blocking all of big blind bluffs, and you have just such poor equity versus versus his strong range. I mean, floats are pretty easy. So let's see, we call, and turn is a queen of spades. So how would you play when on the button facing like 9 big blind bet? So 9 big blind into 13.5. So basically half of your stack. I mean, yeah. I mean, just tell me the bottom of your calling range. Jack 10 offset, okay. Pass with gatos. Okay. Yeah, it looks like that, but it's actually quite the opposite. Um, we have to be playing here a lot neater. And in reality, I will be playing here extremely neater versus especially 9 big bet. So we're folding here Jack 10 almost always. We're folding here Queen Jack, King 10, even a hand as strong as King Queen. We should be folding here, and obviously our weak flush draws. That's because our range here is extremely strong, and big blind has check raised versus button on ace high board. So he has a very strong range, and in reality, when people check raise here, they have a very strong range, like actually extremely strong. So like, don't make a mistake of calling these hands king queen, queen jack, king 10, jack 10. As you can see, especially if you have jack 10 with a 10 of hearts, like the difference here, if you have jack 10 without a 10 of hearts, it's like a break-even call. But with a 10 of hearts, you're losing like 70 big blinds per 100, or like 60 big blinds per 100 by calling this hand, because you're blocking all of his bluffs. Um, a lot of people make mistake that if their hand has improved, they cannot fold. Like Queen Jack. My hand was just a second pair. Now it's a second pair with a gut shot. I have to call. King 10. I had a gut shot. Now I have a pair. I have to call. King Queen. I have to call. But it's not true. Like, especially here, people will understand that this is a very bad board to bluff, and they will never slow play out of position on the turn. Like, we will never slow play a straight here. They will never slow play like ace-3 here. They will always be betting for value. And I doubt they will be, bluffing a hand like 5-3 or 4-3 on the turn. They might be bluffing some of their flush draws for sure, but there are not going to be that many flush draws in their check raising range. Oh, okay. Yeah, it was after a check raise. But, I mean, can't you see it here? Bet, raise, call. Like, if you're confused as what is the action, you could just see it here, right? So that there is no confusion. Okay. So this is another sport where even though your range has improved, you should be playing it very, very tight. And in reality, like even folding an ace maybe could be a good strategy for you, especially versus a big bet like that, or versus a jam. Like if you somehow face a jam, again, very easy fold with ace-5 or ace-6. Also, when you have 8-5 of hearts, what you should be doing with it if you check raise the flop and turn as a king and you have 8-5 of hearts. What do you think is the best strategy? Shove? I mean, yeah, check fold, exactly. Just check fold. Because people will not be folding these hands. Like even versus a half pot, people are never folding king 10. Imagine that you bet half pot on the turn and like people will not be folding king 10 or queen jack or king queen or pocket queens, they'll never be folding a pair with a gut shot. Never, never, never. They are always calling. And block bet is very stupid because you don't want to be block betting with your two pairs, right? If you all of a sudden like block bet, like you check raise, you bet big, and then you block bet. It's very obvious what you have, right? So you should not be thinking about what sizing I should be betting with my hand, but rather what sizing I should be betting with my range. You could do exploitative things versus fish, of course. Versus fish, you could pick different sizings depending on what hand you're holding. But I mean, versus fish, it's very easy. But even if I was playing versus fish and I have 8-5 of hearts here on the turn, I'm always checking. I will never be bluffing, even versus fish, because okay. So what is our strategy versus a check when we're on the bottom? What should we do? Which sizing we are using, and what are our value bets? What are our bluffs? So, I mean, why? Why, Efren, you want to be using different sizing for value and for bluffs? Like, it's going to be very easy to play versus you. Because you're always betting smaller when you have a bluff, and you're always betting bigger when you have a value bet. Right? It's not good. It's very easy to see right through what you're doing. And it's not like betting half pot with bluffs is better and betting bigger with value is better, right? Like you don't know which size to pick. It's not obvious which size will bring you more AV. Like sometimes it's obvious and you could make exploitative sizing adjustment, but not here. As long as his turn hands should be betting, we can bluff a little bit more. Yeah, but what are our bluffs? What hands you will be using here to bluff? Again, name them. Don't just say draws. All the tens. What tens? So flush draws, right? Small pairs. Small pairs is closer. Ten nine of hearts, right? You don't have just 10-9. You're going to be folding it. Again, this is not helping you because you have to say exactly what hands. Yeah, we should not have a lot of bluffs, exactly. Like what gut shots we have? We have queens of hearts, we have 10-9, 10-8, 10-7 of hearts. That's it. What open-enders we have? Like, can you name me one open-ender? I don't see any open-enders here. So basically only flush draws. No, it's okay. No, don't be sorry. It's fine. It's okay to make. Just thank you for writing. it's good that you share your thought process. Yeah, we don't have a lot of bluffs. That's true. And because of that, we should be bluffing our 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s, 6s, right? We're not bluffing 5s and 4s because we are blocking his bluffs. 5-4, 4 deuce, and 5 deuce. But we're bluffing these hands, and we're turning jacks pretty much into a bluff. When we have jack 7 versus a check, we're bluffing it, which is insane. But that's how our strategy looks like. And we're checking back our flush draws, some of it. So we have a bluffing range on the river. So we'd rather be checking 8-6 of hearts than we would be checking 7s. Because both of these hands don't have a lot of showdown value. And we will be bluffing all of these hands by the river. But we'd rather strengthen our weak checking back range by checking back flush draws than by checking back 7s. Because 7s don't help our range, right? We only improve on a 7. But 7-6 of hearts help our range a lot. And it's not like we're gonna see a lot of bluffs on the river, as it is. So we are bluffing basically our pocket pairs, and we could consider bluffing some of our weak jacks. And we're checking our flush draws. And we're value betting pretty much everything which is better than a top pair. Maybe king queen, you know, is a good value bet as well. And we're value betting mostly half pot. I mean, like a third pot as well. Okay. So as you can see, our opponent should be folding king 5 and king 4. That's why we're turning a jack into a bluff, and he never has a jack. So we're applying a lot of pressure, and we're making him fold flush draws. So why am I so comfortable check folding my flush draws on the turn? Because a lot of the people will not be checking them. They will keep barreling them. Maybe they will be betting like half pot. Because first of all, button is never folding a pair plus gutter, so I don't have enough fold equity. And second of all, when I check, I'm not gonna face enough bluffs. If my opponent has a jack, it's going to be yeah, even if he's bluffing, he has a better hand than mine, exactly. His bluffs have me beat. Like, he's never gonna fold enough on the turn, and he doesn't have any bluffs. So I can very comfortably check fold 9-6 of hearts. It seems like a good hand, but it really isn't. So I will just never be bluffing this turn, pretty much. I may still be bluffing a hand like 5-4 of hearts, something like that, because I cannot check fold this hand. So like 5-4 of hearts may be fine, but everything else I will be checking and check folding here, because people will not be putting enough bluffs on the turn. As well as you can see, if I have king 5, I'm just going to be check folding it on the turn. I'm never going to be calling it. Okay. So let's go to the next spot. Uh, okay. So king 6-4 again is not the board which we could see bet 100% of the time, and it's not the board where we want to be using a bigger size, because our top pair doesn't require any protection, and because there is not much hands to get value from. This board is very dry, right? If the board was like king 7-6 with a flush draw, then we could consider using a bigger size when we have a hand like king queen or king jack. But when the board is like king 6-4, there is no much reason for us to be using a bigger size. So, we're just using a block bet. And it's quite obvious which hands we're checking back, which hands we're betting. So here, as you can see, the sizing is different, right? So if you remember on Jack 8-4, when we were check raising, we were using a 6 big blind check raise or 4.5, right? Now we're using a 3 big blind check raise, which is like, why do you think this is happening? Why here we're check raising for such a huge sizing and here we're check raising for such a small sizing? And here, as you can see, like here, we're never check raising two pairs, but we're almost always check raising a top pair. And here, we're almost always check raising two pairs, and we're check raising only the best of our top pairs. Very interesting how it changed, right? King 6-4 and Jack 8-4 seems like, obviously very different sports, but it's incredible how much the strategy changes. That in one spot we're never check raising two pairs, in other spot we're always check raising two pairs, even though the stack depth are the same. So yeah, basically Ralph is correct that dry board and we don't need protection. We're check raising only very good hands and we're check raising for a small size because we don't require any protection. The board is super dry and we wanna give him good pot odds so he will float us with hand like ace-10 offsuit or queen jack with a backdoor flush draw, hands like that. Because if like there's no reason for us to make a huge check raise here. We're not scared of anything with our value. Also, by making a small check raise, we can check raise hands like ace-6, 7-6, 6-5, hands like that. We could check raise a 6 for protection if we want to. So here he's in a very tough spot because he has to float us with ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, with ace 7, ace 5 even. Basically with any hand which has a backdoor flash draw, he has to build a big free betting range, you know, like 16% of the time, because our range is very linear. Yeah, it's a nice board for big blinds range, I agree. But still, yeah, there are not a lot of hands which improve Button's range on the turn. I mean, Broadway cards kind of improve his range, but still, if we check raise King Jack and the turn is like a Queen, which is a bad card for us, like Queen improves Button's range a lot, we're still ahead and we could make a big bet on the turn. So very interesting that here we have a huge check raising range and here we have a small check raising range. So let's say we just call and the turn is a 7. So how are we playing this turn? Yeah, we're button and big blind checks. So yeah, what sizing we're using and what hands we're picking to bluff. Again, if you're confused, you could look here. This is the line, right? See bet call. It's very clear. I mean, we should check back some top pairs for sure on the turn, right? So yeah, we're checking back some top pairs, but not a lot. We're checking back king queen, king 10, king 9, but I mean, we're still ahead. Value bet in pocket 8s, 8 7, ace 7. We would rather value bet a7 and check back king 9 because king 9 doesn't require a lot of protection, but a7 requires a ton of protection. Big blind has a lot of floats, hands like queen jack, ace 9 and stuff like that. So folding out these hands is very good for him. And yeah, we don't get to bluff here a lot. Like, even though we have a lot of hands like queen 10, queen 9, jack 10, jack 9 to 9, we have a ton of bluffs, but we don't want to use them because we don't have a lot of value on this turn. Also, keep look that if we have 10 9, 10 8, 9 8, we are mostly checking these hands back because we have a lot of equity and we want to improve our checking back range. However, if we have a hand like Jack 10 or Ace 5, Ace 8, we would be betting this most of the time because Ace 5 is a very shitty open-ender. If we improve, it's very obvious, right, that, you know, like this is a bad card and it's very hard for us to get value from. However, 9-8 is a very good, clean open-ender. If we hit a 10, you know, it's very hard to read that we have the nuts. And if we hit the 5, we're going to have the nuts straight. So every time our opponent has an 8, he's going to give us, you know, his entire stack. Uh, so the important thing here, no, that we're still calling like queen 6 9-6, so we're still making some loose calls, but I guess nothing out of the ordinary is happening here. Interesting again that versus a pot bet, we should be folding some of our second pairs, like 9-7, 10-7, Jack-7, Ace-7, hands like that. And in my experience, again, people are never doing that. People are never folding the hands which have improved. They would feel stupid to fold Jack-7 of spades because they're like, okay, so I called the flop, because like, I mean, and I hit one of the better turns for me. So, and he bets huge, but I mean, like, I cannot fold because my hand has improved. Like, I have one of the better hands here. As you can see, it's a very bad call to make. We are losing a lot of money by making this call. So even though this is the board which doesn't improve us a lot, and as Rafa told, we should be checking back King, Queen, King 10 from time to time, in reality, people are never folding a 7 on this turn. Like, they're always going to be calling it. So if I had a hand here like King 9, I'm usually going to go for a second value bet, even though GTO says that I should not be. Yeah, but it seems like such a great spot to bet big. Because he's going to make a lot of mistakes, and here it's very tough. I mean, it's still checking King 9 sometimes, I mean all the time, but I think value betting looks better. And obviously here 10-7 is losing a lot by making a call. So I mean, King 9 is close, but King 10, King Queen definitely going for some value. King 7, King 5, like pocket 8s. These are the hands which I would definitely be going for some value. And if I face a jam, again, there are like not a lot of bluffs which our opponent could have. These are only hands like Jack 5 of diamonds, 10-5 of diamonds. These are the bluffs which he's capable of having. And as you can see, versus a jam, like, you could be basically calling only 2-pair plus. Like King Queen is not a very good call because, again, like, there are not a lot of bluffs which he could have. And he's probably going to be jamming every 2-pair hand for sure, maybe even a straight, because he would think that you have a king and you're not going anywhere. So, but folding a king here makes a lot of sense. Okay. So, quick question. What is the difference between king, king 6 and Jack 6-6? As a button, how would you play these two flops? Yeah, let's bet on Jack 6-6. That's good. Yeah, king 6 we're betting 100% of the time, for sure, because this is the board where we have a huge advantage. Like king 6 we're playing very, very aggressively. But on Jack 6-6 we're checking back a ton. On king 6-6 we will be checking back around like 50-60% of the time. Because this board, first of all, like big blind has a lot more sixes than us, so we don't have not equity advantage. Big blind has more trips than we do, and also there is no reason for us to bet a jack, right, or for us to bet a king. Like on king 6-6, why would you ever bet a king? What are you trying to get value from if you have like king 9? Like, sure, he's going to float you with his ace highs and with his like I mean like 10-8 with a backdoor flash draw or something like that, but you're never gonna get free straights of value, right? And you don't need any protection, so what's the point of betting? Like, why don't you check and pot control when you have like king 6-6 and when you hold the king? And you might say, well, I want to bet my kings because I want to bluff a lot, but why don't you bluff as a delay? Why don't you check the flop and bluff on the turn? It's not like if you check the flop on king 6-6, people will immediately think that you have a capped range, because in reality you don't have a capped range. You have a lot of kings which are motivated to check back, and you can check back a lot of cheaty hands as well. Yeah, but you don't want to bet with any hand, right? Like, what's the point of betting? You should have some. Like, it's not like C betting on the flop is so good that you wanna be C betting all of your bluffs. It doesn't work like this, right? Because C betting on the flop is not very good. You will be facing a lot of floats. You will be facing a lot of check raises as a bluff, a lot of check raises for thin value. Like, it's not a good situation for you. To be honest, if you have a bluff, it's probably better for you to play as a check. So let's go check 6-6. Hmm. Oh, okay, we'll go. Yeah. Yeah, I agree that people are scared that when you don't c-bet this kind of boards. I mean, here, as you can see, we're c-betting 65% of the time because our jacks are a lot more vulnerable than our kings. Like, on king 6-6, we'll be c-betting here like 45-50% of the time. But what I'm trying to say also, if you have a hand like 8-7, like 8-7 of spades, I will be checking it back like 100% of the time. Because it's like when you bet the flop, it's not like, yeah, you have 45% fold equity, but you're facing so many check raises. People will not be folding their aces high. I don't know. It doesn't look like a very good spot for me. It doesn't look like a spot where I wanna get my fold equity on the flop, because if I check back, again, the same thing will happen. Like, which improve 8-7 are the turns where I will see a lot of bluffs. And when the turn is a high card like ace, king, or queen, people will be playing very scared. People will be playing very needy, so I will have a very good bluff with my 8-7. Yeah, I'm probably checking a lot more than GTO. I'm probably checking this sort of boards like 40% of the time, or 50% of the times, like 50-55. I'm going to be c-betting some jacks for sure, but I like to play most of my range as a check. Also, one of the reasons why I like playing most of my range as a check, let's say we go check check and turn it to the flop, right? So what is big blind strategy? What do you think? So first of all, I mean, not donk, prop, right? Because the flop went check check. We donk when we like were not, yeah. So, I mean, we cannot probe every jack because our opponent is not capped. But yeah, like, so Efren listed the strategy which most people will be using. Betting a jack, betting a six, betting a flush draw, betting a gutter. So I think this is the strategy which most people will be using. Just, you know, like he checked back the flop, he doesn't have a good hand, he has like ace high or a pocket pair. This is the range which they will put me on. When in reality, I should be checking half of my trips. I should be checking almost all of my jacks. I mean, I could be betting like half pot, but like 60%, 65% of my jacks I should be checking, you know. I should be checking, you know, half of my flush draws. Like, I should be playing here extremely tight. Because we need to protect our range. Like, button is not capped. And, you know, if we start just betting everything, like if we bet every six here, right, then we don't have a check raising range on the turn. Yes, exactly. So we need to be playing very, very passively here in reality. But people will be betting every six, a lot of them. People will be betting every good jack, a lot of them. So I expect them to cap their range a lot on the turn. So I get a very profitable bet on the river. So here on the flop I have like 45% fold equity. Here on the turn I will have like 48% fold equity, and if I'm playing versus a GTO bot, in reality, if I delay the turn, I will have around 65% fold equity. So on this board, if I have a bluff, I would rather check back the flop and delay on the turn than c-bet on this flop. It's not a very good spot for us to c-bet, even though it seems like a dry board, it seems like we should be bluffing it a lot, but people will be fighting back. This is very interesting because when we check, as you can see, button is probing a lot of his ace highs, or delaying a lot of his ace highs and weak pocket pairs. And some people are just trying to show down their ace highs, they're always checking them back. And some people will try to, you know, go for thin block bet, just a bet small on the turn. So it depends versus whom you're playing. If a guy is very polarized all the time and he's just showing down its ace high all the time, then I think we could be betting a lot of our sixes and our jacks. There is no point for us to be slow playing. But if you think that you are going to encounter this sort of strategy where he's going to bet small with his ace high king highs just to make you fold two cards, then, you know, like you should start checking a lot more sixes and jacks to prevent him from playing this card. I'm definitely betting my flush draws, and I'm betting my gutters most of the time. Sixes are indifferent. Sixes are very dependent on how often you're gonna see a block bet delay on the turn. You need sixes so you could check raise it on the turn, right? You need to have a wide check raising range. But that's the question, like, do you need to have a check raising range on the turn or not? Because if he's showing down all of his ace highs, you don't really need to have a check raising range if he's only very polarized. But the linear he is, the more check raising range he requires. So you need to be checking some of your flush draws so you can check raise, and you need to be checking some of your sixes so you can check raise. Okay. Okay, we've been going over it 1 hour 40 minutes, so I think it's time to take a break. Um, Do you have any questions? I have a lot more to show you. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough time. Do you have any questions, guys? Okay. Okay, nice. You could submit again some of your hands maybe next time. I don't know. I think we'll still be covering the sports. Is it very theoretical for you? Would you rather we talk about? Would you rather have more practical examples, or it's fine? What do you think? Because for some people it may look a little bit more very theoretical. We cover a lot of theory here, what we need to do and stuff. Where you could play a lot more exploitative in reality and be fine. Okay. Some practice is good for sure.